Hello YouTube. In this video I'm going to introduce a strict empiricist approach to philosophy of science known as manifestationalism. This is a development of the debate between scientific realism and constructive empiricism, so it's worth spelling out that debate a little bit first. I do have a whole series on scientific realism if you're interested in more detail regarding the arguments here, but I'll just give a kind of brief background. So here's how Bas van Fraassen, who is the philosopher who came up with constructive empiricism, here's how he frames the debate. According to scientific realism, the aim of science is to provide theories that are true, and to accept a theory is to believe that it is true. So the goal of science is to produce theories that accurately describe the world. Now, of course, in practice, we may not think that our current theories are completely true, but truth is the goal, and most realists will say that current theories are at least approximately true. I mean, yes, there are simplifications, idealizations, certain things that are currently unknown, but broadly speaking, science delivers an accurate picture of the way the world is. By contrast, according to constructive empiricism, the aim of science is to provide theories that are empirically adequate, and to accept a theory is to believe that it is empirically adequate. So to say that a theory is empirically adequate is to say that it accurately describes all of the observable things. Where a phenomenon is observable, basically just in case it can be detected by the human senses. So the observable is the stuff that you can, see and smell and taste and touch, and that's it. That's pretty much it. Scientific theories describe all sorts of things beyond what the unaided human senses can reveal. Scientific theories will tell you about genes and electrons and superpositions and black hole singularities and cosmic inflation, gravitational waves, dark matter, laws of nature, all of that stuff. As the constructive empiricist sees it, we need not believe in any of the claims that scientific theories make about those things. Science aims only to accommodate what we can directly perceive. It doesn't aim to give us a true picture of these unobservable realms. Science is not a tool for penetrating beyond perception into an otherwise unobservable realm. Now, as the name indicates, constructive empiricism is intended as an empiricist philosophy of science. Empiricism is a philosophical tradition which places emphasis on sensory experience. I mean, the slogan here is that all knowledge is derived from sensory experience. Empiricists will try to reject metaphysics, they try to resist holding beliefs beyond what sensory experience reveals. Although for some complications on this point, you can check out my video, How to Be an Empiricist. I'll link that in the comments. Now, modern science poses a question for empiricism. Can science be understood in a way that is consistent with an empiricist stance? The first assumption here is that science is a rational activity. And more than that, that science is pretty much the best tool that we have for investigating the world, right? That's sort of taken for granted by the people within this debate, by most of them anyway. At the same time, modern scientific theories describe all sorts of things beyond what sensory experience reveals. The world picture provided by modern science is radically different from the one that we get from our senses, and this is the famous tension between what Wilfrid Sellars calls the manifest image, which is the world as it appears in our everyday experience, consisting of people and objects, colours, sounds, taste and smells and stuff, and then the scientific image, which is the description of the world provided by our best theories, which often goes far beyond the manifest phenomena. The point of constructive empiricism is to give an interpretation of science which allows empiricists to regard science as a rational activity. And this interpretation needs to meet two conditions. It needs to respect the text, as it were, of actual scientific practice. So it must be compatible with what scientists are actually doing. And second, it has to be consistent with an empiricist epistemology. Obviously, otherwise it wouldn't be an empiricist interpretation of science. And this is the context in which the constructive empiricist says, okay, the aim of science is to give these theories that are empirically adequate, that accommodate what we can perceive. So So, I mean, obviously, constructive empiricism seems to meet the second condition of being consistent with empiricist epistemology. Does it respect the text of scientific practice? So, I mean, first sort of idea about this is, obviously, okay, scientific theories postulate all sorts of things beyond what's observable. But the basic method of science is observation, in the sense that theories are ultimately tested only against the observable consequences. Scientists test theories by deriving predictions and then making some sort of observation to check whether those predictions are true. So a theory will say many things about the unobservable, but by definition, those things can't actually be checked. All that we ever have access to is what's observable. So the constructive empiricist will say, well, you can legitimately remain agnostic about everything else. You can do science perfectly fine while remaining agnostic about this, because ultimately the way that you decide between theories is by deriving predictions about what you observe. So, like, suppose that Verity believes that T is true, while Sydney believes that T is merely empirically adequate. So it's true for what is observable. Well, how exactly could each person's belief be falsified? The method is the same in both cases, at least from an empiricist point of view, right? Ultimately, all we can do to falsify each belief is to reveal a conflict between T and our actual experience. So it's observation, right? The risk of Verity's belief conflicting with what we observe is exactly the risk of Sydney's belief conflicting with what we observe. So Verity's additional belief in the general truth of the theory is, as Van Frassen says, empty strutting and posturing, this display of courage not under fire and avowal of additional resources that cannot feel the pinch of misfortune any earlier. The realists' additional beliefs, their beliefs about this unobservable stuff, will never face any kind of additional test. Any evidence for the truth of a theory is also evidence for its mere empirical adequacy. And therefore, from a scientific point of view, you gain absolutely nothing by extending belief into the unobservable. You may gain things from other points of view. I mean, like, if you want to argue for the existence of God on the basis of the fine-tuning of the universe, well, then it's very nice to be a realist, because you can believe that like, the parameters of the universe itself are, like, actually fine-tuned, for instance. So realism is nice in that situation. But from a scientific point of view, well, as Van Frassen says, empty strutting and posturing. So, I mean, it's worth noting that, realism and empiricism as defined here, they're claims about the aims of science as a whole, right? So you can think of these as claims about the success conditions of science. For a constructive empiricist, provided science has given us theories that are true for all observable phenomena, it's successful. And there's nothing more that you can ask from it. Of course, individual scientists may form further beliefs. They may believe that their theories are true beyond what's observed, beyond the observable. But that's kind of going beyond what science requires, because science only requires you to respect the results of observation. Okay, so I just gave the basic argument there for constructive empiricism. But there's a number of philosophers who've pointed out that this argument, in fact, seems to lead to a more extreme position. A position known as manifestationalism. So, according to manifestationalism, the aim of science is to provide theories that are manifestly adequate, and to accept a theory is to believe that it is manifestly adequate. Alright, so what's this manifest adequacy? Well, to say that a theory is manifestly adequate is to say that it is true for all phenomena that have been or will be actually observed. So the aim of science is to deliver theories that are true for all actually observed phenomena, past, present, and future. So all I'm committed to when I accept a theory is that the theory is true for whatever it is that people actually perceive. Phenomena that are observable in principle, but that are never actually observed, are simply irrelevant. Science doesn't need to account for those. So manifestationalism is much stricter than constructive empiricism. The vast majority of observable phenomena will never actually be observed. Take, for instance, dinosaurs. Dinosaurs are observable. They're very large animals that would be detectable by the human senses if we had been around at the time they supposedly roamed the Earth. For a constructive empiricist, to accept certain theories in paleontology means to believe that dinosaurs really existed. But dinosaurs were never actually observed. At least they weren't observed by humans, who are the relevant community, since we're the ones who are engaging in, scientific activity. And so, what the manifestationalist will say is, yeah, I mean, science just doesn't, it's irrelevant, right? The truth of these claims about dinosaurs is just totally irrelevant. So, dinosaurs were never observed, they're never going to be observed. That's it. And so, in fact, in general, claims about the deep past, totally irrelevant. Science doesn't need to account for it. It doesn't need to be true for any of that stuff. Very few philosophers defend manifestationalism. Jamin Asay and Seth Bordner, in their article A Modest Defense of Manifestationalism, provide an initial case for the view, although they don't quite come out and say that they actually believe it. So as Asay and Bordner note, the basic argument for constructive empiricism seems to better support manifestationalism. So recall that the point of that argument was that evidence for the truth of a theory is exactly the evidence for its empirical adequacy. So nothing is gained by believing that a theory is true rather than empirically adequate. No greater risk is taken. But clearly, the evidence for the empirical adequacy of a theory is exactly the evidence for its manifest adequacy. So therefore, nothing is gained by believing that a theory is empirically adequate rather than manifestly adequate. No greater risk is taken. So that is to say, any evidence that a theory is true for all observable phenomena is just going to be the evidence that it's true for all observed phenomena. After all, the only phenomena that can distinguish between competing theories are the phenomena that that are actually observed. So if we're empiricists and we think that knowledge is grounded in sensory experience, it seems that what's relevant is, well, what is actually becoming the content of experience, right? This stuff in the world that's observable in principle but never actually observed, like that never forms part of experience by definition. You never observe it, right? So manifestationalism seems, in that sense, to be sort of better placed as an alternative to realism, because constructive empiricists hold beliefs that actually go beyond experience. Their beliefs take risks that will, in principle, never be subject to empirical testing. So surely it's a bit hypocritical, isn't it, to criticize realists for doing the same thing? I mean, the realist holds more beliefs than the constructive empiricist, but they're both engaged in empty strutting and posturing in terms of what can be empirically tested. Manifestationalism is the more principled position. So here's a basic argument for manifestationalism that comes from Asay and Bordner, although I have modified this somewhat, to suit the purposes of this particular presentation. But this is the basic idea. So first, if one is an empiricist, then one should understand the aim of science in a way that respects empiricist epistemology. Second, empiricist epistemology maintains that experience is the sole legitimate source of information about the world, and so an empiricist has no epistemic obligations to hold beliefs that go beyond the boundaries of experience. And third, constructive empiricism, but not manifestationalism, maintains that the aim of science extends beyond the limit of the evidence available to the members of the community of observers, and thus requires beliefs that go beyond the boundaries of experience. Asay and Bordner also argue that manifestationalism is supported by considering an ideal community of scientists. What can science expect to achieve under ideal circumstances, given a community of people like us, in that they share our sensory capacities and our place in the universe, and that they act as perfect scientists? So, like, imagine, a bunch of human beings who are, living on this planet. They're in the same place and time as us, but, well, I mean, not time, because we're imagining that it's over a long time period. But, basically a bunch of humans living in the same sort of place as us, right? But they're perfect scientists. What would they come up with? So they carefully collect and record every observation. They're scrupulous about designing their experiments, careful to ensure that their theories are properly supported by the observations, and so on. and they carry out this research till the end of time. What do we get at the end of time? Well, their theories will be manifestly adequate. Their theories will be true for all actually observed phenomena. But there is no guarantee whatsoever that their theories will be true for all observable phenomena. Whether they have correctly captured the facts that are observable but not actually observed, who knows? Only God could know that, right? So the constructive empiricist's ideal is in principle unobtainable. Jonathon Hricko, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, but I think it's Jonathon Hricko, in his article How to Understand Empirical Adequacy as an Aim of Science, makes a similar point here. The empiricist rejects the claim that truth could be an ideal of science, because to say that a theory is true is to say that it, fits the world in itself, not simply the world as revealed to us by our senses. And so, as such, as Hricko puts it, one of the things that stands in the relation of fit or correspondence is completely inaccessible to us. And that's supposed to be a problem. But in fact, constructive empiricism has the same problem, because it requires a fit between our theories and phenomena that will forever be unobserved. So as Hricko says, like absolute truth, the ideal of constructing a theoretical model that fits phenomena that scientists will never observe is not the sort of ideal that scientists could approach. Now, of course, in practice, we will probably never successfully construct a set of theories that are fully manifestly adequate, that accommodate all observations. The world is too complex and humans are too flawed. But we do have methods for constructing theories that fit what we actually observe, right? So the requirement to fit what is observed is an ideal. We can take that as an ideal that can guide inquiry. But there's no method for fitting theories to observations that are just never made. Okay, so quick advert. If you like my videos, please consider signing up to my Patreon. These videos do take quite a lot of time, I try to be conscientious and do good research, and that does take time. So I know that the videos are just boring old slideshows, but there is actually quite a lot of work that goes into them. And so, I'm not that wealthy. It would be very nice if you could support. It really does help. It genuinely really helps if you can give me financial support. So, it really helps pay the bills. Or you can just send me some money on PayPal. It's all really, really appreciated. As I say, the channel takes a lot of work, and it's just nice to have some compensation for that if you're able to give anything. Now, if you're not able to give any money, that's cool. I mean, maybe you could just give the video a like, consider subscribing, right? Just do something to help the videos in the algorithm, okay? So, with that said, let's get back to philosophy of science. So I guess the point then is that it looks like if all of this is correct, then manifestationalism better respects empiricist epistemology. But recall that there is another condition on the empiricist account of science. It has to make sense of actual scientific practice. And this is where the basic objection to manifestationalism arises. The objection, and this is most famously stated by Gideon Rosen, is that manifestationalism can't account for the imperative to make new observations. So here's Rosen's example. Suppose that Delia is an archaeologist who has a theory which is true for all the evidence that's been collected so far regarding Etruscan urns. Now there's one last uninspected patch of ground over which Delia has sole ownership, so she may dig it if she wants, but she may also destroy it. What should she do? Should she dig, or should she destroy? Well, if Delia is a manifestationalist, and she takes it that the aim of science is to present theories that are true for all observed phenomena, well, by digging at the site, she will produce new observed phenomena, new observations, and of course it might be that what she finds contradicts her theory. And so she's, at the moment, she kind of has a manifestly adequate theory, but by digging at that site, she risks turning a manifestly adequate theory into a manifestly inadequate one. By destroying the site, she guarantees that her theory will remain adequate for all of time, that it will just continue to fit the actually observed phenomena for all of time. And so it looks like she shouldn't dig. Like she can destroy the site and ensure that she has fulfilled the aim of science and has presented a theory that's true for everything that is ever going to be observed. Of course, this seems totally absurd, totally contrary to how we would expect a good scientist to behave. And so Rosen says, manifestationalism therefore motivates an ostrich-like ducking at crucial moments, which is clearly incompatible with the imperative to observe as much as possible that informs all real science. Now, by contrast, the constructive empiricist has no trouble with this kind of case. If Delia is a constructive empiricist, she will say that theories must be true for all observable phenomena, regardless of whether they're actually observed. So her theory is held to account by the urns that are still buried underground. Those buried urns are observable whether or not anybody actually observes them. But of course, given that theories are judged against all that's observable, we therefore have an imperative to go and check, to go and look at the urns. So Delia should dig. So while manifestationalism may better respect the empiricist credo, it has to regard science as a fundamentally irrational activity. It has to judge as irrational the imperative to make new observations. But I mean, that's a major aspect of the scientific enterprise. If you're an empiricist who wants to respect science, your best bet is constructive empiricism, because that best satisfies the conditions of making sense of scientific practice while still respecting the empiricist epistemology. So, Asay and Bordner raise a number of objections to this argument. I'm not going to go through all of their objections. I mean, you'll have to check out their paper for all of them. They raise a number of different ones, but I think the main points, the main issues that they bring up are these. So first of all, they object that Rosen's argument misunderstands manifestationalism. What manifestationalism says is that the aim of science is to produce theories that are manifestly adequate. However, it does not say that the aim of science is to preserve the manifest adequacy of whatever theories are currently held. So showing that a theory is manifestly inadequate, that actually doesn't in any way contradict the aim of science as the manifestationalist sees it. Basically, I guess their charge is that Rosen has conflated the aim of science as a general tradition with the aim of, I don't know, like some specific theory. But that's not an appropriate way to think about this. For the manifestationalist, there is no imperative to preserve the manifest adequacy of any particular theory. The point is simply that whatever observations are made, the aim of science is to produce theories that accommodate those observations. So suppose that Delia digs at the site. Well, there's two options. If the observed phenomena are consistent with her theory, that's fine. Her theory continues to be manifestly adequate, so, as a scientist, she'll continue to hold the theory. If, on the other hand, the observed phenomena are inconsistent with her theory, that's actually fine too, because now Delia will simply be required to construct a new theory. That's it. That's fine. Like, the aim of science is not hindered by being required to construct a new theory. So the point is, we've got to produce theories that are adequate to what we observe, and so we can do that by, sometimes we do that by maintaining the theories we currently have, sometimes we do that by coming up with new theories. I mean, maybe one way to think about this is to imagine two scientific fields. In one field, the scientists adopt a theory which never faces any incompatible data, so they just stick with that theory for a long period of time. In the other field, the theories are constantly changing as new data that keeps coming in, like that's incompatible with the currently accepted theories. Now, in both of these cases, the scientists in question are successfully working towards the aim of theories that are adequate to the data. That's happening in both communities. So theory change is not a failure for the manifestationalist, no more than it would be for the constructive empiricist or for the realist. I mean, everybody recognizes that, sometimes you maintain a theory that you currently have, sometimes you get incompatible data, and then you have to change your theory. So additionally, Asay and Bordner point out that if manifestationalism entails this sort of observation minimization, then they suggest that actually both constructive empiricism and even scientific realism may have this entailment also. So consider scientific realism, right? So this says, okay, aim of science is to produce theories that are true, period. Now suppose you have some biological theory which entails facts about how a particular species would behave in certain specific situations. As far as you can tell, this theory is true. However, the species has never actually been placed in those relevant situations yet. Should we construct an experiment to put the species in these situations that have never obtained? Well, the worry is that if you construct that experiment, then you're going to risk creating new facts that will contradict your theory. Now, it might be objected that this doesn't work in the case of scientific realism because, if the theory turned out to be incorrect about how the species would have behaved in some scenario that has not yet obtained, then the theory can't have been true in general, in terms of its description of what's actually going on. But I mean, that point does turn on controversial issues about laws and causality and dispositional properties and so on. I mean, maybe there's just some sort of fundamental indeterminacy in the universe, such that I may be fully correct about what X actually is, but incorrect about what would happen to X in certain counterfactual scenarios. That's a controversial matter, and it doesn't seem like you would want to. Yeah, and so the point is that if those controversial matters get resolved in a certain way, then it will end up being that realism entails that we ought to minimize observations in certain crucial ways. Yeah, I mean, this is the idea is, well, look, I mean, if this is a problem for manifestationalism, really it's a problem for everybody. Now, I must say I'm not sure that these points really address Rosen's objection, because I think that what Asay and Bordner have shown is that it's not inconsistent with the aim of science, as the manifestationalist conceives it, to dig at the site, right? So, like, you can dig at the site, right, if you want to, even if this would risk making these new observations that would show your theory to be manifestly inadequate. You can do it. But so what? I mean, the point really is, the point that needs to be respected is, we want to say that Delia has an imperative to dig at the site. She would be violating her obligations as a scientist if she were to destroy it instead. I mean, that's what needs to be accounted for, is the scientific imperative to make relevant observations. And I'm not sure that, I don't think Asay and Bordner actually do account for this. In fact, they explicitly say that whether Delia digs at the site depends simply on whether she wants to know if there are urns at the site. Her decision to dig or destroy is just a matter of the motivation of an individual scientist and has nothing to do with the aim of science as a whole. What motivates us to do science is generally a thirst for knowledge. Delia is constructing theories about Etruscan urns, so presumably she wants to know about Etruscan urns. Given that she wants to know about Etruscan urns, it would be bizarre for her to destroy the site. But that's all we can really say. I mean, if Delia has different motivations, maybe it would be perfectly reasonable for her to destroy the site. But I think, insofar as it makes any sense to talk of the aim of science as a whole, this does, it doesn't really seem right to just say, well, it's up to Delia, right? So Delia's theory entails that there are urns at the site with certain properties. I think we would want to say that as a scientist, she now really does have an obligation in some sense to check this. Of course, this obligation is weighed against other obligations. I mean, maybe the digging is cost prohibitive, maybe the site is sacred land and there are moral reasons not to disturb. But I mean, other things being equal, if your theory entails O, and you are in a position to easily check whether O is the case, it really does seem to be a norm of science that, you ought to do so. If you were to actively take steps to prevent anybody from checking whether O is the case, like if Delia were to blow up the site so that nobody could check it, I think that you would be judged as a very bad scientist. And so that is what needs to be accounted for here. All right, so with that in mind, an alternative response to Rosen's objection is given by, Jonathon Hricko, as I mentioned before. Hricko points out that so far the debate has presupposed that science has a single primary aim. And for manifestationalism, this is the production of manifestly adequate theories. But this idea that science is organised around a single aim is an unnecessary limitation. There's no reason why a philosophical account of science must suppose that science is organised around a single aim. From an empiricist point of view, the key is just to ensure that whatever we propose as the aims of science must not involve any problematic metaphysical commitments and must not involve any knowledge claims beyond the deliverance of experience. So Hricko suggests simply adding to our account the following aims. First, the aim of making new observations, and I quote, where observations may be new in the sense that they involve unexplored parts of nature or types of experiments that have not yet been performed. And a second aim is to make new observable phenomena. So you can use instruments to bring new types of phenomena, new types of things into existence. If one of the aims of science is making new observations, then we can, that accounts for the imperative that Delia dig at the site. Now, of course, we might worry that this is a little bit ad hoc and that it introduces unnecessary complexity into our account. So ultimately we might think, no, that's still going to favour realism, it's still going to favour constructive empiricism. But I think there's actually a slightly different aim here that we could add, which isn't ad hoc, and which really does sort of put manifestationalism, in a good position. So, I mean, why exactly is it that there would be an imperative to make new observations? Well, one answer is that we're just interested in learning about the world, and given that we learn about observing, we want to observe as much as possible. But then, why bother learning about the world? Well, one answer to this is because it's useful to do so. So science is an incredibly powerful tool for solving practical problems, and it does this by teaching us how to control the phenomena. And this seems to require making lots of observations to learn what the phenomena are actually like. So here's my proposal for an aim of science, right? Science aims to give us theories that help us to control the world. And you're not going to become proficient at controlling the world, at solving a wide range of problems, if you constantly destroy evidence that could potentially refute your theories. I think that this aim of controlling the world is probably required for a complete philosophical account of science, regardless of whether you're a realist or an empiricist. I mean, clearly scientists aren't going around just constructing true theories, right? They spend a great deal of their time applying theories to practical problems. But just having like a set of truths doesn't necessarily really help with that. Like when you apply a theory to try to solve a practical problem, you don't just want like a list of truths. You need to focus on the relevant truths. You need simple laws, simple principles that are easily understandable, that allow straightforward calculations and so on. So I mean, if a scientist were trying to uncover the cause of a disease, say, it would not actually be helpful to just have like all of the truths about the human body. You got to be selective. You've got to sort of look at specific mechanisms and specific phenomena. So, if we were to present the construction of true theories as the singular aim of science, we would sort of illegitimately favour only this theoretical side of science, and we'd be treating its practical applications as a sort of bonus feature that has nothing to do with science in itself. And that seems at least very questionable. So the thought is, look, a realist is going to need to say that science aims to give us theories that are true, but also theories that help us control the world. And then the manifestationist can say, yeah, science aims to give us theories that are true for the observed phenomena, but also theories that help us control the world. So the addition of this aim of controlling the world that's not ad hoc. There's good reasons to take this to be an aim of science, independently of any issues to do with manifestationalism. But the aim of controlling the world clearly implies, given the way the things actually work, that we need to seek out new observations. We need to make new observations. That when we have these theories and there's some test that could be done of them, well, we should try to make that test. So I think that this deals with Rosen's objection. having said that, it does seem to me that there remains a problem for manifestationalism, namely that I think manifestationalism can't really make sense of theory acceptance from a psychological point of view. It's not psychologically coherent in the right kind of way. So constructive empiricism, remember, says that to accept a theory involves believing what the theory tells us about the observable phenomena. So how does that play out in practice? I mean, what does that look like? What is the content of my beliefs if I'm a constructive empiricist? Well, provided we have a definition of which things are observable, and I mean we do, because these are the things that are available to the unaided human senses. Okay, so we have our definition of what the observable is. Well, now it's easy to see what my beliefs are, right? I just read my commitments off of the theory itself. So, I believe the theory is empirically... I say, look, I believe this theory is empirically adequate. And then you ask me, well, what specifically do you believe? And then I can just look at the theory and tell you. So I believe, for instance, that there's an ocean under the surface of Jupiter's moon Europa. Okay, so there's a bunch of theories, models about Jupiter's moon Europa, which postulate an ocean under the surface. And then I know that oceans are among the observable things. So I'm like, okay, well, that's one of the things I believe. Simple. On the other hand, if I was to say, well, certain things about whether there's bacteria somewhere. Well, bacteria aren't. Maybe there's a theory that postulates there's bacteria in the Jupiter's moon Europa, but they're not observable. So I mean, I don't believe in that stuff. But I can tell you what the content of my beliefs are, generally speaking. Now, manifestationalism says that to accept a theory is to believe that what it says about what has been and will be observed. The problem here is we don't know what will be observed, and you can't just read that off the theory. A theory isn't going to tell you what's going to be observed. So, as a manifestationalist, I say, I believe the theory is manifestly adequate. And then you ask, yeah, but what specifically do you believe? I mean, do you believe, for instance, that there's an ocean under the surface of Jupiter's moon Europa? Well, I have no idea what to say. I don't know whether anybody will in fact observe that. Maybe we'll go there one day and, we'll dig down and find and actually observe the ocean. Maybe we won't. Who knows? And I can't even defer to other people about this. I can't say, well, here's what the experts say, because nobody knows whether we will actually observe this. So I can't really commit in any substantial way to a belief in manifest adequacy. I mean, obviously, I can say the words, I believe the theory is true for all that will be observed, but then I have no idea what will be observed, so my avowal of that belief is in an important sense empty. So the point then is that actually maybe there are three desiderata for a successful empiricist account of science. It must, first, make sense of scientific practice, respect the text of scientific practice. It must respect empiricist epistemology, but then also it has to be psychologically applicable. It has to be possible for us to kind of enact it and to actually hold. It's okay, this is what these beliefs are, and the claim is only constructive empiricism meets all these conditions. With that said, I would suggest that there is an even stricter form of empiricism which is still on the table here. So even if this objection I've raised is a problem for standard manifestationalism, there's another form of manifestationalism which I'm going to call Presentist manifestationalism, although I'm now thinking as I look at this, I really need a better name for this view, because that's kind of a mouthful. So I'll work on it. I'll maybe come up with a different name for this. But according to Presentist manifestationalism, the aim of science is to provide theories that are true for all phenomena observed so far. And to accept a theory is to believe that it is true for all phenomena observed so far. So we're not claiming that it's true for all the things that will be observed in the future. That's just, you're agnostic about that. The only thing you're saying is, the theory, when you accept a theory, all that's being said is this theory accommodates everything that we have observed up to this point. Now, obviously, if we take this to be stating a singular aim of science, then it faces the obvious problem that it would imply that scientists just don't need to make predictions. They should favour theories that only describe the data we've collected, and then just shouldn't be concerned about what happens in the future. That would not respect the text of scientific practice. But obviously, bear in mind the point about pluralism, and pluralism of aims, and then we include the aim of controlling the phenomena, solving practical problems. Well, now we're required to start making predictions, making new observations, and so on. So, why favour presentist manifestationalism? Well, it immediately solves this problem of psychological applicability. It's clear what the presentist manifestationalist believes. What she's saying when she accepts a theory is she believes it to be true for the phenomena we've currently observed. And if you ask her for specifics, she's not going to have any problem giving them. Now, of course, you can't read off what's been observed from the theory itself, but you don't really need to, because facts about what has been observed are going to be established in some sense prior to theory construction, right? Like, this is, in ordinary cases at least, there's some... What you're doing is, you're saying, here are the facts that this theory is supposed to account for, right? And this is going to be facts about experiments that have actually taken place, observations that have actually been made. And so, now of course there's maybe disagreements about that, but that doesn't really matter. People can disagree. I can accept one theory, you can accept a different theory. But what's going on when we accept these theories is we're saying, this theory accommodates these observations. And so this set of observations that we're appealing to, that's it. That's what the presentist manifestationalist believes in. I think that presentist manifestationalism is more aligned with historical empiricism, or at least with the more skeptical strands of it. Certainly it says, look, what you believe is just what's revealed by the senses, and then you just don't go beyond that. In that sense, it's more empiricist than standard manifestationalism, because you're saying, maybe there's going to be certain things revealed to the senses in the future, but who the hell knows? That hasn't happened yet. You don't know. It's suspicious of inductive inference, following Hume's problem of induction. Hume famously argues there's no justification for inferring from anything that we have observed so far to conclusions about what the future will be like. It's a habit of the mind that we make these inferences, and maybe there are pragmatic reasons to make those inferences, but these inferences don't have any epistemic support whatsoever. There are no grounds for making these inferences from what we have observed to what will be observed. So in that respect, this is a classic part of the empiricist tradition. So presentist manifestationalist seems to be properly empiricist. It also seems to respect scientific practice, arguably. So what we can say is look, scientists don't need, in general, they don't need to assume that their theories will be true, that their theories are true for what will be observed. In fact, the notion of falsificationism is sort of part of the mythology of science. Scientists will often approvingly cite Karl Popper and point out that, the evidence might show that the theory needs to be thrown out. All that's required to do science is to construct theories that fit what has been observed so far. And there's no need to take the leap of faith that these theories will continue to fit all that will be observed in the future. And in fact, we might think that a good scientist is somebody who would take an active effort sometimes to try to make observations that refute the accepted theories. Still, it's worth noting that unlike Popper's falsificationism, presentist manifestationalism does not contain any sort of normative claim that scientists ought to spend their time trying to falsify theories. The traditional falsificationalist, it's about, well, as Popper says, conjectures and refutations. You come up with these sort of bold claims about the world, and then you actively try to show that the claim is false. You try to derive a prediction and make an observation that will refute the claim. And a great deal of scientific work isn't really like that. As Thomas Kuhn pointed out, much of science involves puzzle solving and filling in gaps. It's not about trying to overthrow the underlying theory. And so presentist manifestationalist is sort of fine with all of that. I guess maybe presentist manifestationalism retains the spirit of falsificationism, but it shifts the emphasis. So it will say, all theories are in principle falsifiable, and it is no part of science like, it is not required that you commit to the idea that a theory will continue to work in the future. But, you know, some scientists may spend their time trying to falsify the theory. Some scientists may adopt the theory and they try to protect it. They try to develop the paradigm, right? Which option you take is going to be a matter of temperament, and both options are basically fine. But both options are answerable, ultimately, to what has been observed. But they're not answerable to what will be observed in the future, because nobody knows what that will be. So, you know, the idea is, you know, maybe we've got a view here that is embodying the good parts of falsificationism, right? I mean, the big question for presentist manifestationalism is whether the two aims that it has identified are actually coherent. So it says that science aims to produce theories that are true for what has been observed so far, and also that these theories, it aims to produce theories that help us control the world. The problem is that if we don't believe that a theory is true for what we will observe in the future, I mean, if we don't trust inductive inference, then it's not clear that we can make sense of rational prediction at all. When building bridges, we apply physical theories that tell us how to balance compressive forces with tensile forces, right? These theories have served us very well so far. But if I don't trust that these theories will continue to work, then it seems like there's no reason to bother applying them when constructing a new bridge. There's no reason to trust, like, I should just, like, go with witchcraft or something. So this is the problem of rational prediction, and it's already a famous problem for Popper's falsificationism. So you can see Wesley Salmon's paper "Rational Prediction" for more on that. This I think is probably going to be the main concern about presentist manifestationalism. If there is a good solution to this, then presentist manifestationalism seems like it's in pretty good standing. Now, I mean, I think it's just worth noting, you know, just to kind of sum up it here at the end, like, there's a lot that's being taken for granted here, right? I mean, one thing that we might wonder is, well, the assumption of all of this stuff is that, like, science is a rational activity. But maybe science isn't a rational activity, and so the very idea of a philosophical account of science that allows the empiricist to understand it as a rational activity is just wrong-headed. I mean, maybe it's good to proliferate theories that actively conflict with the observable phenomena, as someone like Paul Feyerabend might have argued. Maybe there's no fact of the matter whether a given observable phenomenon fits a theory. All these points are legitimate criticisms of manifestationalism, but I mean, they equally affect constructive empiricism and realism as well. So, I mean, you know, at least with respect to the specific debate between those three views, it does seem to me that manifestationalism has something going for it, like I say, relative to the other two. That is all I wanted to talk about today. So, thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.